fundamentally disagree with all of those things. I think
Right.
when it comes to trying to get people to pay attention, remember us, and have an impact on them, storytelling is one of the best ways to do it.
Welcome to my show, Pensions and Investments, where the intersection of global business, investments, and law come together. I am your host, Atara Twersky, and today I am really excited to be speaking with Matt Dix. Matt is an acclaimed author, a writer, a teacher, and my favorite, a storyteller. Welcome to my show, Matt. I'm so excited to have you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you. So, Matt, you're a storyteller, which means you love words. I'm a lawyer, which means I believe words matter. But let me tell my audience really, really quickly. I'm going to let you do most of the talking, but I just want to intro you and say I found you because I love Matt Abrams, the Stanford professor whose podcast you were on. He teaches an amazing class and gives a great podcast on public speaking. And you were one of his amazing guests because you had the best story ever, which I'm going to let you tell all your stories. But what struck me about that podcast and like, how does this intersect with law, business, and what I'm doing is that I think it is really important in everything we do to be able to convey your story, your words through a story. And I think that's kind of missing. You're also a teacher. I think it's missing in the classroom with kids. And so I want to really see how you can tell us how we can bring that skill set to everyone, all the professionals in the world who can become better at what they do through the art of storytelling. So take it away.
Well, I guess I'll say that, I think a lot of times people see storytelling as something that might be a waste of time or a soft skill or, a nice to have, but not essential. I fundamentally disagree with all of those things. I think
Right.
when it comes to trying to get people to pay attention, remember us, and have an impact on them, storytelling is one of the best ways to do it. Our brains are evolutionarily evolved to hear stories, pay attention to them, and remember them, because for most of human history, we haven't been able to write anything down. So
Right.
when we tell a story, we actually leverage brain chemistry in our favor, and we become more memorable, more entertaining, more impactful. I just think it's foolish not to be telling stories.
Right. I agree. I mean, that's really, it's funny as a lawyer, everyone's interested in how the judge is going to perceive the law. Is the law on my side? And I always tell everyone, well, start with the story because the judge, he's also a person and he wants to hear the story. And what he's going to remember is what are the facts that led up to this? So I couldn't agree with you more. So how did you get into all of this? Like, walk me through your background.
It was not purposeful in any way. I've been speaking to people for a very long time as an elementary school teacher for 27 years and a wedding DJ for 25 years. But in terms of actual storytelling, I went to the New Eurekins Poets Cafe in New York City in July of 2011 to tell a story for the Moth, uh, a nonprofit live stories told on stage without notes competition. My friends sent me there and said, you should go do that. And I said, all right, I'll go do it, thinking I would do it once. And I told a story and I won the competition. And more importantly, I fell in love with storytelling. And for a long time, I thought I would just be someone who told stories around the world, made people laugh and cry, and that would have been great. But then eventually business people started to find me. Attorneys started to find me. The FBI found me in a good way, in a
Wow.
bad way. And they all sort of figured out that I had something to teach them. And so today I continue to teach elementary school, but I do a great deal of consulting and coaching and teaching of workshops to, companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft and universities around the country. It was not purposeful. It was a accumulation of many yeses along the way.
Well, that's such an interesting thing that you just said. That's a loaded thing to say. Like you have to say yes to so many things, right? To end up doing what's really meaningful for you a lot of the time.
Right.
So
Yes,
I'm not sure you
exactly.
even realize what you said, but that's impactful for me. Okay, tell me like the story in short version, that first story, or any great story that you think my audience would love to hear.
Well, the first story, I haven't told it in a long time. That's interesting. No one really asks me for it. But, essentially, it's a story about high school. In high school, I was a pole vaulter. I became a pole vaulter because I was an average sprinter, and our team needed more pole vaulters. And we had
Okay,
one
tell us
pole.
what that is, because I happen to know what that is, but I only learned about that recently. So tell, in case
Oh,
anyone doesn't know what a pole vaulter is.
sure. Pole vaulting is that track and field event where you run down a runway with a large fiberglass pole, and in the last second you jam that pole into the ground. You throw your feet directly in the air, you throw your head at the ground, you pull back on the pole. Theoretically, it will bend and throw you over a bar anywhere between 7 and 10 feet in the air.
Okay.
So,
Just for some
so
context.
yeah, it's
Okay.
it's an interesting sport. My coach chose me and a bunch of other sort of middling sprinters. We had a sprinter on our team named Jimmy Dean, and he was the best pole vaulter in Massachusetts at the time. But there were events in our track and field schedule that were called relays, and they required three people to compete in an event, and you had to clear opening height in order for anyone's points to count. And so Jimmy every year at the relays, he was only Jimmy, so he never got to compete because we needed two more people. And so the
Right.
coach decided, let's get two more pole vaulters, and he took us all down to the pole vaulting pit. And essentially the test was, here's a pole, run as fast as you can, jam the pole in the ground into this metal box, and then throw your feet in the air, throw your head to the ground, pull back on the pole. I didn't go anywhere on that first vault, but I was still holding the pole. I didn't abandon it at the last moment. And because I was still holding the pole, that made me a pole vaulter. And
Wow.
so I joined the pole vaulting team with Jimmy Dean and a boy named Jack Daniels. Jimmy Dean, Jack Daniels, and Matthew Dix became the Blackstone Millville Regional Junior Senior High School pole vaulting team. And the goal was to clear opening height, which was 7 feet 6 inches. And I started clearing it eventually. And when our first meet came up, you know, my goal was really to earn the respect of my teammates. And so in the midst of the competition, I found myself rooting against Jack, the other kid. I didn't want him to clear opening height. I wanted us to fail so that people would perceive me as better than Jack and therefore find respect for me. Because it turns out that in sports, sometimes it doesn't matter if you win as long as everyone thinks you're good. And that was the truth of the matter for me. And so
Wow.
Jack cleared opening height, unfortunately, and so did I. And we got points, but it didn't matter because we won the meet by like 100 points. So when I
Okay.
got on the bus, I thought I was going to be celebrated, and I wasn't. It was like that moment when I realized that I'm living in a Copernican world or a pre-Copernican world where I'm the sun and everyone revolves around me, but no one's willing to acknowledge it. And so I'm suffering in this life where I believe I'm at the center of the universe, but I am the only one who believes it. That's essentially what that first story amounted to.
Wow. That's a
Yeah.
great story. Let's also discuss those names, Jack Daniels
Yeah.
and
Crazy. And the funniest thing is in pole vaulting, there's a lot of waiting around because people get to skip. Like Jimmy didn't have to vault until he wanted to. And so the way they would sort of keep your attention is they would announce Smith up, Jones on deck, Jackson in the hole. And for me, it would be Dix up, Dix on deck, Dix in the hole. So it was like a really problematic name always.
yes.
It became very problematic in pole vaulting.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I know about pole vaulting because someone said to me, "Oh, you have a son. If you want to get him into a good college, you should do pole vaulting because it's not a sport that's like commonly done. So if he does it, it'll be a slam dunk." I was like, "I'll suggest."
Yeah, it is
But
true. Many times I won a meet because the other team did not have a pole vaulter. And so all I had to do was clear opening height and I was
right.
done. Yes.
Wow. Okay, so tell me, what do you tell lawyers? You say you coach to like a lot of lawyers and business people. So we do here securities class action litigation, a very intricate area of the law. And I notice just a lot of really well-educated lawyers are really bad presenters. Like they're not getting their points across. I sit in a lot of board meetings. I present myself, so it gives me opportunity because I'm often waiting around listening to others present until it's my turn. And I'm really just struck by how scared, quiet their voice becomes, and really it doesn't instill confidence in like clients. And I'd love to know, like, what do you tell them?
Well, I mean, part of the problem is they don't have the confidence to instill confidence. It turns out you have to
Right.
have something to offer it. So that can be a problem. Most of the time when I'm working with attorneys, I'm working on either opening and closing statements, infusing storytelling in that in that process so that we can engage the jury better, activate all of those good brain chemicals that come with a story. Or I'm helping them with their witnesses, sort of helping them prep witnesses so that when a witness takes the stand, they can answer questions by telling a story, which can often be beneficial in terms of getting a point across as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, that the first one I think I do naturally, but I wouldn't have thought that witnesses should be always telling a story. Well, I guess it's not always, but I guess you at times it would make sense, and in those cases, that's when you're instructing them to do so.
Yeah, just teaching them the strategies so that if they get asked a question, it's easier to tell a story if you have some strategies embedded within you. I also managed to weirdly get witnesses in prep to say things that they don't necessarily say to attorneys. A lot of times, what we've discovered by sort of analyzing what I say compared to what lawyers say,
Yeah.
I tend to open with questions that are very open-ended. It seems to me that when I'm working with attorneys, they sort of have a goal for each witness.
Yes.
I don't have a goal. I sort of keep it wide open. And because of that, oftentimes when we're listening to me have a conversation with a witness, valuable information comes out that didn't come out when they were working with the attorney because the attorney has that one track mind.
Yes.
And because I sometimes, or all the time, I'll tell a story at some point in the midst of a conversation. If a witness tells me that their father passed away last year, I will tell a story that demonstrates empathy by talking about some loss that I have had.
Mm.
That causes people to suddenly open up and want to share more often. And I think oftentimes attorneys don't think about sort of sharing their own life with their clients.
Yeah.
And if they
That's
did,
so
I think
true.
they'd get more out of those conversations and those collaborations.
That's such an interesting point. I think like for me, it's just about like having human connection with people, which I think is missing in a lot of fields because lawyers, doctors feel they have to have this level of professionalism and a kind of a barrier between them and the client. And I think that if you break that barrier, that's where real magic happens, really
Yeah,
just everywhere.
I agree. Teachers often think it too, and my students know everything about me. But even, I had a doctor. She retired recently, but she was my doctor for like 25 years. My wife too. When we met, we happened to have the same doctor, and that doctor would come to my storytelling shows, and I had dinner with her once, and like I really loved my doctor, and it was because I knew her slightly socially in a way that when I came to the office, I felt like I was seeing Fran, not Dr. Gertman, right? And I think that's a real thing. I think those barriers that certain professions feel they need to put up, they're incorrect and foolish to be thinking those things. The best thing to do is to become more connected with the people you're working with.
Right. I live my life that way, so I absolutely agree with you. Let's talk for a second about numbers because I also deal in the business world of numbers. Is there a way to tell a story around numbers that makes it more digestible for audiences and for people to understand and investors?
Yeah, I think, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, the framing of numbers, through storytelling strategies makes a lot of sense. A lot of times, oddly, people will try to make sense of a number and sort of make less sense in the process. So when I see stats like the number of Milky Way candy bars eaten in a year could wrap around the Earth 5 times, that's a terrible way to describe the number of candy bars because no
Right.
one's walked around the Earth 5 times. And
And
our
understands that.
Right. And our perception of the Earth is really a globe, which is significantly smaller than the Earth. It actually probably underscores the number of candy bars that are actually being eaten. So
Right.
the instinct to provide context is great because large numbers often don't make sense to people. But the problem is you have to choose something that actually has context. I was working with a pharmaceutical company recently, and they were debating whether they should say 9 out of 10 patients had no side effects or 90% of patients experienced no side effects. And I knew for sure that 9 out of 10 was better because if it's 90%, that kind of means that everyone has a 10% chance of having a problem, whereas 9 out of 10 really just means one person, and people can usually assume they're not going to be the one, right?
Right.
And so 9 out of 10 is a better version of that story because no one wants to walk around with 10% of
Right.
a hazard contained within them.
Right.
So sometimes it's just talking about what makes sense contextually and how those numbers are going to sort of land in the minds of the audience.
Right. It's so funny you use that example because I deal in like stock drops, right? Like, so this stock fell 38%. But when I present, while I do give that number, I always turn it into it fell from, you know, $80 a share to, $63 a share, because that's something that people can understand. But the percentage is not something that you can quickly calculate in your head.
Right.
So,
And it can be really confusing.
yes.
If you have a stock that costs a great deal of money, a 10% move can actually cost somebody a lot of money, whereas, a stock that's $80 can move 50% and it's only going to cost them
Right.
$40 per share. So real dollar numbers mean something to people most of the time until numbers get enormous. One of my favorite stats is like I ask people what happened 1 trillion seconds ago. It's a good way of explaining what a trillion is, and people like your audience right now, put in your head, what do you think happened 1 trillion seconds ago? And what really was happening 1 trillion seconds ago was it was the Ice Age, and woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers were roaming the earth. Like that is the size of 1 trillion, right? Where
Right.
most people often guess with me, like World War II, the Civil War, the birth of America. You're not even close. You're 32,000 years off. But that's a
Wow.
good way to contextualize a large number, but real dollar numbers often mean things to people in most contexts.
Right. Okay, so you started an organization called Speak Up. Tell me a little about that.
Well, I was driving to Boston and New York and then sort of all over the world telling stories, but I live in Connecticut and there was nothing in terms of storytelling in my own state. So, it was a snow day when my wife and I weren't teaching, and I looked up and said, "We should start something here in Connecticut." And she said, "Sure." And I said, "There's a place down the road, it's art and theater space. Maybe I'll go talk to them today." And I did. And then Speak Up was born. It's the idea of saying yes, right? So
Yes.
it's an organization that produces live storytelling throughout New England and beyond. And so we take storytellers and people who want to tell stories, and we teach them how to do it, and we curate shows and put them on stages. And for a long time, I was teaching storytelling through that organization, Speak Up. Today, I'm much more of a consultant and a coach, and I work for other organizations, and I have my own company now to work through that. But Speak Up is still alive and well. We have a podcast where we air our stories, and
I love
my
that.
wife and I will deconstruct them. So yeah, it's a great opportunity for people to come and tell stories for us.
I love that. So, how do you incorporate storytelling for the kids in your classroom? Like you teach 10-year-olds, am I right?
Yeah, I do. Well, I teach them to tell stories, but I tell stories relentlessly, and it's
I can imagine you have a fun class.
yeah, it's good. The first day of school every year, I tell a story about in sixth grade, I went off the diving board at a girls' pool party with a bathing suit that was a little too large and not tied. And so when I hit
Ooh.
the water, I left the bathing suit behind and I ended up in a pool naked in front of my classmates. And
Is this a true story?
yeah, it's a true story. Yeah.
Ooh,
And so a couple years
brutal.
ago, yeah, it was not good. But a couple years ago, a father called me and said, "Why are you telling my daughter stories about being naked in a swimming pool?" And I said, "Well, your daughter's 10, so she's probably or maybe going to have her period at some point this year. She's definitely going to experience some moments of embarrassment as an adolescent, becoming a teenage girl.
Right,
And I wanted her to know that when she is feeling possibly embarrassed, ashamed, or afraid, I understand what that feels like. Not at the same context level, but, in
right.
terms of, understanding what it's like to feel isolated or foolish in front of a bunch of people." And
Wow.
so, it is not uncommon for my female students over the course of the year to get their first periods and to come and tell me about it, even though I'm in a school of almost exclusively female teachers.
Wow.
And it's because I constantly tell them about my shames, embarrassments, foolishnesses. And so I told this father, I said, if you want, when she has her first period, we could just call you, or I can help her through that process by acknowledging what has happened and then sending her off to a female teacher because I don't understand the products she needs very well. And he said, "No, no, no, do what you're doing. That sounds good to me."
Wow, I
But I
love that.
tell stories all day long as a way of connecting to kids, making them understand I'm human, and so that when I need to tell them something important, they'll listen and hear because they believe in me.
Wow, I love that. You also said something interesting about shame, right? I think the antidote to shame is to share the shameful experience, and then it kind of diffuses itself that way.
Yeah, for sure. There was one story I was never going to tell in storytelling. When I was 19, I was the stripper at a bachelorette party in the break room of a McDonald's restaurant,
Oh my God.
which is a horrible moment in my life and a terrible
Wait, you
decision.
agreed to that. That was a voluntary job for you.
I did. I
Okay.
was excited because I thought, wow, someone wants to see me kind of naked, although I wore a thong.
And you're 19, so that's
Yeah.
exciting at that
Right.
point.
Yeah. Once I walked into the room and I realized what a terrible decision I had made and how horrible it was going to go, and it did. But I was never going to tell that story because I was just kind of embarrassed by it. And I told my wife the story. And then there was a time when I was competing in a storytelling show and the theme sort of matched that story. I don't remember how exactly. It was like exposed, I think, was the theme. And my wife said, "You got to tell the stripping story." And I said, "I'm never telling that story." And she said, "You've got to." And so I went up in front of about 2,000 people, and I was so mad at my wife as I walked across the stage towards the microphone. But as soon as I started telling it, they laughed, and not laugh at me, but like laugh at the story. And
Right.
instantly, all the shame disappeared. And I realized, oh, as long as I say it, then all the shame goes away.
It's
So
over.
it
Yeah.
really,
Yeah, I
it's
always
true.
tell that to my kids. If
Yeah.
something happens in school, wherever, just get it out and it will be over.
Right.
If you
It's
keep it
really,
in, that's
it's a,
when it becomes shameful for years to come, really.
right. Yes, it's a great antidote to shame. That's hard
Yeah.
for people to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I heard you say once, so tell me if I'm right, that one of the people you most admire is your wife.
Yes.
Tell me about that. I love that.
Oh, well, I mean, she made a great choice in a husband, so that's fairly
Number
admirable.
one.
Yeah. No, she's a person who I have learned a lot from in terms of moving through social circles. She can sort of become a friend with anyone on the planet. It is not uncommon for her to run into Starbucks while I'm in the car to pick up her coffee. And when she comes out, we have brunch plans with someone that she has met in line and has known for about 4 minutes, but now they're going to come to my house on Sunday.
I love that.
So watching the way that she genuinely and authentically interacts and connects with people has been really informative to me. And, there was a time in my life when I think I probably judged people in a way I should not have. I would have looked at them and thought, oh, you're different than me. You probably wouldn't understand me. And my wife never has that predisposition. So
Right.
she's taught me to be more open with people, and it's really
Right.
benefited me enormously. I'm
That's
so
beautiful.
grateful to her for that and a million other things that she does wonderfully.
I love that. That's beautiful. So, okay, I'm thinking that most people can learn the art of storytelling, right? Am I right? But then
Everyone
there,
can. Yeah,
right?
everyone.
But then there are just some people who are more gifted speaking.
No,
No, you don't think so? Okay, good. Tell me about that because that's
no.
what I thought.
If you meet a gifted storyteller, it means either that they were desperate for attention at a young age and weren't getting it. And one of the
Mhm.
ways they found out how to do it was to tell the right stories in the right way. That was me.
Okay.
Ignored as a child, discovered, oh, when I tell people my stories, especially my embarrassing and ridiculous stories, they look in my direction. That or they're outstanding listeners, meaning they're
Oh,
inherently picking up on strategies that are being used in the world to tell excellent stories. They can't really articulate what they
oh,
know, but it's there and they're doing it in an unconscious way. Or
oh,
they're one of those people who got like obsessed with SNL at the age of 8 and have just like deep dove into all of these things. No one comes out of sort of the womb as a good storyteller. They're absorbing the strategies or desperately seeking the strategies to help them. But that means that there are essentially strategies that are used, and I teach them all the time to some of the worst storytellers on the planet and help them quickly level up into much better storytellers.
right. Do you also help people become more comfortable in front of an audience? Is that part of the storytelling process, or is that a different skill set?
Well, it's kind of different in that they can become more comfortable in that I can teach them what to expect and I can make them feel prepared. But a lot of it comes down to confidence, and that is sort of a different skill set. I work with a lot of corporate leaders, executives, vice presidents, people like that. And I work with them on storytelling, communication, branding, marketing, all those things. But the thing they ask me about the most, if they get to know me for a while, is actually, can I teach them confidence? I am one of those people who genuinely, sometimes to my own detriment, I kind of don't care what anyone thinks about me. And I
Right.
move through life with this impunity, and they notice it. Once you get to know me, you see it. and they want the same thing. And for a long time, I said, you can't teach confidence. But a
Right.
couple years ago, I started to think you're an elementary school teacher, Matt, for 25 years. You probably can figure out a way to help people with that too. So I'm in the process actually of developing curriculum for confidence. That's different, I think, for most people, but I can make them at least understand what to expect when they take the stage and feel good that they're armed with the right strategies to use. But that feeling of I can walk on the stage and genuinely not be worried in any way whatsoever, that is a gift I have that I'm hoping to find a way to offer to others.
Okay, I think you will. You've written some books
I have.
on this. Just name them, please, for my audience. I'm sure people will want
Oh,
to know.
so there's two storytelling books, Story Worthy, which is sort of storytelling for everyone. Then there's Story Sell, which is a storytelling book for business people. And then Someday is Today is a book on creative productivity, how to get more done in life so you can do the things you want to do. I've also published 6 novels as well.
So you're a man of many talents. They're kind of interwoven around words, but
I say sentences. Yeah, I work in sentences, whether I'm speaking them, writing them,
I
helping
love that.
people say them. Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Matt. It's really been a pleasure. I've admired you from, like I said, Matt Abrams podcast, and you really live up to who you were there. You did a great job. You're amazing. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so much.
imparting all your knowledge. I love it.
My pleasure.
Okay. So just give us like a website. So if anyone wants to find you further.
Yes, they can go to my name, MatthewDix.com, or they can go to storyworthy.com. Both places will take you to me and storytelling and all the things that I do.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thanks.
Okay, we are out. I keep recording because I noticed the last few times I had such great like conversation after that I wanted to like slice it back in. So,
Yep.
but thank you. I mean, I hope it came out great because you were great. So I hope your
Thank you.
voice was good. But you're really just it's so interesting because I have always believed, so I love to like be told that I'm wrong, that people are naturally gifted speakers or they're not. Like people who get like those clammy hands and get so nervous and like, please don't put me up on stage. And then there's other people who are like, yeah, I'll speak, no problem. So it's interesting that you're saying, no, everyone can really be taught this,
Yeah, I
which
wasn't sure of that 15 years ago, but now that I've been teaching it and I've watched really miserable storytellers, miserable communicators level up quickly with, my help, I've become convinced that everyone can do it.
convinced. So why aren't they teaching this as like its own subject in school, right? Like that's what
Right.
drives me crazy. Like it's incorporated. Yes, my daughter has a history assignment and then they make her stand up before the class and give a 3-minute speech. But why isn't it its own class since you're 6 years old? Like then we could have really good speakers.
Right. Yeah, I actually took a speech class in college. It was the best class I ever took in my life. I think probably the real problem is there's no one qualified to teach it. There's lots of people who want to teach storytelling in the world like I do or coach it. But as I tell them, are you actually on a stage on a regular basis performing? And they say, no, I just want to teach it. And like, you just don't want to learn something from someone who doesn't actually know how to do it as well. You
Right.
don't need to win championships like I do, but you got to be on stage every now and again to, understand what the craft is and convince people you're capable of teaching it. So
That's
I
right.
think that is probably not a lot of qualifications. And I think people see it as sort of an unnecessary soft skill. I just think that's crazy.
I think it's crazy. I think it's the most important thing. I'll tell you like a really fast story that I think you're going to love. I didn't want to say it on air because it's about me, but I had a presentation. We're like a 20 lawyer law firm. I was competing with one of my competitors, 200 lawyers, and it was me, and they had a whole team. And I was like, forget it. I'm not going to do it. But I consider myself a good speaker and I'm pretty confident. And so I'm not nervous. I'm like, I'm going to try. And I gave what I consider a really good presentation. So good that even though it was a slam dunk to choose the other firm, they were like, you know what? There's a board of 11 people. We need to get like firm resumes before we make any decision. Okay, give us this, this, and this, and then we're going to decide. So like 3 weeks later, we hold another board meeting in which they have now reviewed all our materials. And I see that like we have 20 attorneys listed and they have 200. And I'm like, forget it. But it comes on and they say, like any final words, like closing statement. And I just started with, size isn't might. And I just basically said, we're a small firm, but like we're really like tough and we can do this. And within moments, they are going to a vote. And they voted 10-1 for me and my firm. And like, I nearly like fell through the floor. I was like, and then I realized in retrospect, when I replayed, they recorded everything, that the other lawyers just didn't speak well.
Uh-huh.
That was really the crux of it. I mean, we could probably do similarly good work, but they just didn't convey that. And I was like, wow, lawyers, they really need to know how to present better.
Yeah, I mean, in all things, I think a lot of times I tell salespeople and marketers all the time, we tend not to purchase the best product out there. We
Right,
purchase the one from the person we trust the most or the brand that we believe in the most.
right, right.
Uh, so,
That's well said.
just getting people to believe in us by our communication can often yield great results.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a book that you could maybe send me because I want to like put it on the website when we post your
Yeah.
podcast? I'm going to send you
Yep.
my address. Okay,
Hmm. Yep.
amazing. Thank you so much. Get home safe. Well, you're only going to Connecticut, right? It
Yeah,
is
not that
so
far.
not so
Yeah,
far.
well, I could almost drive. So,
Right. But thank you for coming on. And we'll edit. I'll let you know what happens, but I think it'll be good.
okay, great.
All
Thanks.
right. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.